I'm Joshua Lisec, host of Daily Persuasion, and I have a special guest today. This is going to be the first of a few select interview episodes. Today I have with us Vanessa Battaglia, at V Battaglia on X. She is, among other things, a writer for Daily Caller, Human Events, and The Federalist. She is an independent researcher and has had a successful career in the civil service, specifically as a hardware, software designer, tester, engineer. I'm sure she'll talk to us a little bit about this because that's how she's learned about how government really works across the country. Her work has come across my information environment, let's say, specifically with her digging up influence by the Chinese Communist Party in the heartland of America and how local politicians are allowing it to happen. It is not cool. Vanessa, welcome to Daily Persuasion.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be your first guest.
Sure thing. Is there anything else that you think that those who are interested in, let's say, political persuasion, financial persuasion, business persuasion should know about you and your background before we begin?
No, I think you got it. That was a lovely introduction.
Well, very, very good. Yes. So as I said, we when we met in person for the first time, that was at a Turning Point event in June 2024 at the launch of the book behind me. I'm not sure if you all viewers can see it, probably not, but of course you've heard about the book on humans, which of course talks about, among other things, the Chinese Communist Party and their history. And that, of course, was a shared interest point between you and I. I am from Dayton, Ohio, and there's a Netflix documentary called American Factory, and the real short snippet of it is that for decades there was a successful automotive plant in Dayton, Ohio, a GM plant, the Moraine Assembly, that employed hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people over the decades. But work began to slow, 80s, 90s, 2000s. You have the opening up of trade with China. You have NAFTA, getting into some international geopolitics here. And eventually the plant closed, and it was vacant for years and years until the Chinese Communist Party showed up. And now the GM plant is literally a Chinese factory of the Fuyao Glass manufacturing company. And I've been privy to that story, but this is something where you, Vanessa, have seen this again and again and again in Maine, Indiana, where I believe you're from, and Ohio as well, where the CCP is spending a little bit of money to buy a lot of influence where it counts in America. I'll pause there and let you fill in the gaps I've opened up for our viewers.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Chinese companies dust off shuttered American automotive and other types of factories, and they say, "Oh, we cherish your resources." That's an actual quote. And so they dust off these bargain basement deals and open up their own operations there, and they say "Made in America," but that's not really what it means. They've sort of misappropriated that phrase now, so now it means something else.
It seems like it's been in the past few years and even months that the typical, let's say, normie American is waking up to the fact that China has significant influence over the world and that they have been quietly colonizing the developing world. And they have been, not so quietly, engaging in a low-intensity conflict against the United States, whether it's fentanyl or it's buying American farmland or it's things like dangerous chemicals and even poisons in food and on materials that Americans are using on a regular basis. It's all plausibly deniable, these shenanigans that are from the CCP. What was it that got you interested in what was going on? This sort of strategy, the ancient Chinese warfare strategy of Sun Tzu, to win without fighting, to subdue the enemy without directly causing them to submit, but allowing them to escape on a bridge of surrender that is of your own design. What is it that caused you to be interested in this, given your work, hardware, software, engineering?
Well, it's well said what you said there about what is it, getting the enemy to submit without fighting. Because the reason that I got involved in all of this is here in Indiana, there was a company that was going to open here, and right when I caught on to the story, our legislature was in the middle of passing a bill that would prevent this Chinese company from opening here, and that company was Fufeng. Fufeng had been kicked out of Grand Forks, North Dakota, the year before. So last year in 2024, that company turned up in Indiana, sidling up to our state government looking to open a factory. But they'd already been kicked out of North Dakota. And the North Dakota government was okay with them going in. That was Doug Burgum, who was the governor there. But some of the state legislators there didn't want it, and they appealed to the Air Force. And the Air Force wound up writing a memo calling Fufeng a national security threat. But instead of just going away, which you would think an entity like that would do, you would think, oh, they got caught, maybe they'll just go away. They didn't just go away. They actually, as far as I know, they visited some other state in the interim, or maybe they went somewhere after Indiana, I'm not sure, but they came down to Indiana and they were going to open a factory here. And our legislature did a similar thing as they did in North Dakota. They rapidly moved to pass a bill. One of the bills that about 30 states are in the middle of passing, preventing Chinese foreign nationals or companies from purchasing land. And in fact, I'm not sure if Fufeng's potential deal would have gotten caught up in the snare of that bill, but it just got sunk anyway. It received too much negative attention from the Federalist, which is where I came in. I kind of added to the chorus of people complaining against it. So that's how I got started. I was just here. I heard about a thing happening. I've been interested in China for a long time. I studied Mandarin in college. I went and I worked in China for a little while during college, which was an interesting time. And then when I graduated, I just went off and worked in defense and was kind of doing different stuff over time. But I've always had an interest in China, and I was really surprised to find that they're doing all of that here. And I had actually seen the documentary that you mentioned about Fuyao Glass America in Dayton. I had seen that documentary about 6 months before. And I had just thought, oh, that's weird. I just thought it was weird. And then I noticed the same thing happening in Indiana. And immediately I saw this is a trend. 2 points make a line. There's a trend happening here. There's a big problem.
And the plausible deniability is part of it. Oh, we're just opening a manufacturing near the area where we're going to be selling the finished goods. There's nothing to see here. Plenty of other companies open factories in the United States to make things. And it's good to have factories in the United States, right? We're doing your job for you. We're creating American jobs, made in America. Like you say, the plausible deniability is there. So what to you is the... as the kids would say these days, what to you is so sus about this?
I think first and foremost, it's the land purchase. So once a company buys land here, it's really hard to make them go away. So in some of my articles, I've called it implanting themselves here, aka to make us pregnant with them. Maybe it's subtle, maybe not so subtle. But when they buy land here, it's really hard to make them go away. There are currently 2 states that are in the middle of actually evicting Chinese companies. Governor Sarah Sanders in Arkansas started this last year very boldly. She just went out there and she just made a law and said that the Chinese companies have 2 years to sell all their land at an equitable price. And after 2 years, she's going to make them get out. So that seems pretty fair, but pretty firm. And then Missouri is doing the same thing now. But I think it's the land purchase that's the worst, because once they're here, then it's easy to multiply. They can expand a factory, which they've done, and Fuyao Glass has done over by you. They can then skip to another state. They can kind of get in here and look around and see what's happening and figure out which other states would be friendly to their overtures. They collect millions of dollars in tax money just to buy land and open a factory. And so they can find other friendly states and collect even more millions of dollars of tax incentives, even though those tax incentives are meant for American companies and they're meant for startups. These incentives are meant to nurture actual new business, not new to us because they're from China. So that's why I think this is really bad. At first, we outsourced all of our manufacturing to China, and they learned how to make our stuff, and that was kind of step one. That's bad. Then China started buying American companies like Springfield Springfield pork products, and different hotel chains and things like that. And that was kind of the next step. And that's also bad. That's not good. There's nothing good about it. But when they come here and their entities purchase our land, they own the land. They're landlords. It's hard to make them leave.
Yes, and what is a detail that is sometimes left out of these conversations that those of us who are in the know, like, we get it, we understand. Businesses in China are effectively puppets of the Chinese Communist Party. It's not like an American business or a German business, let's say, because at any given point, any citizen of the People's Republic of China can act and may be forced to act or may willingly act as a spy for the Chinese Communist Party. It is a one-party state. And whenever a Chinese businessman or woman runs afoul of the CCP, they disappear. This has, of course, happened to Jack Ma, right, the founder of Alibaba, where he disappeared for a number of months and very much dramatically changed his tune several months after his disappearance. And, of course, we don't have to wonder what became of him and what was shared with him during that unexpected vacation from public view. And so often what you'll also see is members of the party, vocally supportive of the party, who go into business. And you know that phrase, separation of church and state. Well, China doesn't have a church. They have the CCP, the Communist Party. And they don't have separation between party and business, between corp and state. And that is the real issue, is that when a Chinese company is up to any kind of work, it's proxy for, or it's a vehicle for, the Chinese Communist Party, which of course is an enmity with the United States. China is in the midst of executing a 100-year plan for sovereignty, yes, and also regional and global domination. I believe they're about 40 years or so into their 100-year plan. And part of this doctrine is of low-intensity conflict, where they can win without fighting, meaning they're able to achieve outcomes that a military would usually, traditionally in history, need to accomplish, but get those without fighting, and therefore not have fighting attacks done to them. If you think about, and this is what we're seeing with the low-intensity conflict between, let's say, the loose connection amongst the radical Muslim immigrants to the United Kingdom, where we now have the sovereign of England, we have the king of England, is publicly venerating Muslim holidays and ignoring Christian holidays. That is how the conquered king responds to his new colonizers, his overlords. And so one could say that the United Kingdom has effectively been conquered without a shot being fired. Mm-hmm. And the police forces of the United Kingdom function as a religious police, where anything that is done or said that is there's not freedom of speech in England anymore. So those who speak out against Islam or against Muslim migrants, who, as we understand, are enjoying numerous benefits of the British welfare state without paying for them. In many cases, it's the individuals who are unemployed, may not even speak English. If you speak out against that as a British citizen, you are imprisoned for a number of months or a number of years. That would be a consequence of being conquered in a traditional conflict. In the United States, when we look at enemy nations setting up what are effectively centralized enterprises across the United States without shots being fired, that's the outcome of having conquered that country. You, as the winning side, you now get to open up your own businesses and benefit from the country that you've conquered. But it's through a Trojan horse technique that the CCP has been doing this. And it turns out the Trojan horse is not filled with soldiers, it's filled with jobs, and it's made of terracotta.
Yeah, these are examples of these places submitting. It's submission.
What do you've done a little more digging than I have into the city of Moraine, which is a sort of a subset of the Dayton Greater Dayton metropolitan area. What have you found with the CCP, Fuyao, in the city of Moraine that makes you a little suspicious? Or you see smoke, you see a gun, and you see bullet casings, proverbially speaking.
Oh, I see lots and lots of cash. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes, I saw a piece about this, and so I'd like you to dig deeper because I don't recall everything that you said, and I didn't read everything. So this is me asking you questions about the reading I should have done.
No. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much more there is to it, but Fuyao has paid off the city of Moraine a lot of money. I've seen photos of $5,000 checks going back to, I think the earliest one I saw was maybe in 2018 or 2020. And you could say, oh, 5,000. Oh, 5,000. What's 5,000? My town council isn't receiving $5,000 checks from anywhere. The police station in the town where I live isn't receiving $5,000 checks. So what I found was Fuyao giving these checks to the city of Moraine. The checks, those big, they're standing together, these big checks. And the checks are being physically handed off to the Moraine police station, but the checks are made out to the Moraine Foundation. And the Moraine Foundation, if you look at their Form 990, all of the officers of the Moraine Foundation, whatever that is all of the Moraine City Council. So, for what that's worth, Fuyao is paying off the individuals. It's not, it's funny that in the photo op, the check would even go to the police, because it's not really going to the police. It's going through a backdoor charitable foundation to the city officials, which tells me it's payoff money. What else could it be? That's it. They say, oh, it's a gift. Thank you for hosting us. But there are plenty of companies that operate in different cities, both domestic companies and foreign companies, who aren't paying cash money to say thank you for hosting us. Also, Fuyao Glass. There are other pictures of Fuyao giving Thanksgiving turkeys to every single. It said to every single city employee, and that's. I mean, again. That's more symbolic, that's not a high dollar item, but it's really fascinating because of what Thanksgiving is about. What was the first Thanksgiving proclamation about? George Washington's proclamation. It was to thank God for delivering us through the revolution for independence from Great Britain, so that we're not beholden to another country. And here's China making us beholden to them, giving us turkeys, I don't even think that Fuyao Glass even knows what Thanksgiving's about. So yeah, those were some examples of what I've seen that's going on between them. In fact, I started snooping. I'll just cut to the chase. I don't know if you saw anything about this, but I'm curious what's going on with Fuyao at this point, because the FBI and DHS investigated Fuyao Glass last summer. They did an investigation in July for human smuggling and money laundering. And the DHS and FBI never finished the investigation. And so I wondered, I wonder what's happening in Moraine. Is Fuyao Glass just operating same as usual? Because there was ample evidence for the FBI to go on. There are articles in the Dayton newspaper about suddenly van loads of same-looking people wearing the same clothes, all men, like all basically young men, started showing up in houses that had been retrofitted with stacks of bunk beds so that they could make like 12 or 15 men live in the same house together. These guys were taking showers in the front yard with a garden hose, which actually, by the way, I witnessed when I lived in China. That is a classic hygiene practice, bathing with a garden hose outdoors. And so there was ample evidence. I mean, that's if that's not evidence for human smuggling, 15 men living in a house, all wearing the same outfit, getting couriered back and forth to Fuyao Glass in an unmarked white van each day. I mean, if that's not evidence of human smuggling, I don't know what to say. I don't know what else the FBI needed to know about. But it's been almost a year now. They haven't finished the investigation. So I kind of had half a mind to go drive over to Dayton and go snoop around and see what's happening and see if I find any photographic evidence of things still going on there. I went into one of the Moraine Facebook groups. Facebook groups, by the way, town level Facebook groups are where you learn everything that's happening in America. And I went and dropped into the Moraine Facebook group and asked them, what happened with Fuyao? And they said, nothing ever changed. It's still the same as before. So I was thinking about going over there and taking out my phone, see what happens.
Interesting. Last year, we need to remember that that was still in the context of the Biden administration open borders policy that allowed roughly 10 million illegal immigrants into the United States. Undocumented, they call them. From their perspective, perhaps it wasn't illegal because we're not enforcing the law, and if there's no one there to enforce the law, it's not really legal now, especially if we let them in, right? They weren't breaking any law because we allowed them to, is sort of the reasoning behind this, right? And of course, has been untold numbers of videos of young Chinese men, Han, specifically Han, ethnically Han men, wandering into the country. By some of these videos show hundreds of them, all about the same age, like early 20s or so. And that's not to say those from Afghanistan or Pakistan or Somalia or wherever else they're coming from, Venezuela. But we see these videos and at least I wondered, where are they going? These are not exactly inconspicuous, let's say, caravans or bands or small armies. And again, every citizen of the People's Republic of China is a potential spy for the CCP. Mm-hmm. And if you search, if you just Google CCP spy busted, you will find story after story after story of U.S. military members who it turns out were spying for China.
Selling
professors, mm-hmm. individuals with security clearances, doctors, mm-hmm. lawyers. Now, we don't mean to incite any sort of prejudice or ethnic hatred or even suspicion of any kind. What we have to understand is the way that the People's Republic of China has worked since the 1920s communist movement of Mao Zedong was, if you don't do as we say, we will hurt your family. That's how Mao's monsters have run their communist organization. First, it was small bands of mobs roaming the countryside, setting farms on fire, murdering farmers and landlords, and threatening those who would not submit to collective ownership of the land. This is for 100 years what Mao Zedong did, and it was threatening family members. And so if you are a citizen of China living in the United States, working in the United States, maybe you've been here for 20 years, but maybe you have an older sister who lives in China, and she has 3-4 kids now, let's say. That's now your weakness. Mm-hmm. What every successful far left wing, and the Chinese Communist Party and the government of China is technically, would be classified as a far left wing organization. What the left has always been good at is finding a victim's weak points. What will make someone crack, submit? For some, it's, you see this picture right here? These are your nieces and nephews all under age 12. They're now in an undisclosed location. They've been kidnapped from their parents. You will send us these files from your workplace, or they will be executed in front of their parents, your sister, and just, I will do whatever you say to prevent that from happening. And that's unconscionable. That couldn't happen today. No, this is 2025. Do you know what year it is, Joshua? And they don't understand that that's how the far left thinks. But maybe we should, because Luigi Mangione is the new idol of the left wing in the United States. He's the folk hero of the Democratic Party. And of course, we know what he's famous for. Like we say in Unhumans, this is what they do every single time. They use threats, they use mayhem, they use murder, They use all number of things. And whether they're Chinese or whether they're American, they will do whatever it takes to win. And sometimes it's a matter of threatening your family members with gruesome death back home in the mainland. Other times, it's a check of $5,000 you split 5 ways. And that is what is so disconcerting, is that American towns are for sale for $5,000 each. And the council gets to split it 4 or 5, 6 ways. I'd like to say, Vanessa, that every man, and woman of course, every man has his price. And if you don't decide what it is in advance, it's going to be far lower than you ever would have thought possible.
And it's a good point about the $5,000 checks, because again, you could look at it and say it's such a small amount of money. You could look at it and say, well, surely a town council, surely that wouldn't impact anything either way. But there's no way that that town council, that city council of Moraine, is going to drive Fuyao out of there, even if their better consciences guide them otherwise. They can't, because number one, they could be afraid of what could happen to them. They could be afraid of the same hitman, henchman mentality that you just described, if they even know about it, which I'm sure they were made to somehow know about it. But even if it's not about that, their own town would call them, and this is like a much lesser outcome, but the people whom they govern in town would call them a bunch of hypocrites. They'd say, oh, you took money and you're throwing them out. Even if they attempted to throw out Fuyao, I think the town people would say, oh, but you accepted their money. But if they don't try to throw out Fuyao, they'll say, but you accepted their money. So once you accept the money, there's nothing that can be done. I looked into what they did with the money. I sort of thought if they were smart, they would have immediately built a playground with a plaque on it that made it called the Fuyao Playground or something. That would have been smart of them to do, and go ahead and launder the money elsewhere and let it be put into something where you know what it was. I haven't found any evidence of that yet.
Yes, and there's a couple of cognitive biases and persuasion plays working. One of them is the consistency bias. And this is something else that the left is historically, over the last 250 years or so, has been good at, is identifying cognitive biases in the human psyche and then exploiting them to the maximum degree plausibly deniable until such time as they don't need to deny it anymore and they can just do what they want. And then, of course, is one of them I'm talking about is consistency bias, which is what you just brought up, where, well, you received our check, you've posed with us on camera smiling, and it's on the city's website, and you allowed us to show up and join you on stage for campaign events, re-election events, and so on and so forth. And here you are on camera also sharing turkeys with your people, so they're biased towards the thing that they've been doing, which is thumbs up Fuyao. It's doing things that are approving of, even if you have suspicions and are wondering, your behavior has been consistent in one way or another, so you're more likely to yourself continue in that behavior. Another one is, it was a technique that was written about and popularized by, of all people, Benjamin Franklin. This idea that you can get someone to give you a big favor if you first have them do a small one. And I believe he would sometimes open meetings or negotiations or having a call on someone with asking for a glass of water or for a drink of some sort. And he would later end the conversation with a major ask or request or demand. But because he had set the tone for you serve me and give me what I want in the beginning, it was easier to build up to something larger in the end. Benjamin Franklin found this out. And so we see, will you receive this gift of ours? Can be built up into when you find evidence that we are engaging in human trafficking of Chinese nationals to take Fuyao's jobs originally promised to the citizens of Dayton, Moraine, and so on and so forth, and now our own people are staffing them. Should you find evidence of that, maybe you would just keep it to yourself. Well, this is hypothetical, but it's only semi-hypothetical.
No,
it's part of the persuasion that is, it's all plausibly deniable because it's happening here in the United States, in Ohio, and if it is told explicitly to the normies, here's what's happening in Moraine, Ohio, there would be an outrage. So the objective is to keep it plausibly deniable.
Well, there is actually an interesting example of that. If you're interested to hear, have you heard of mask diplomacy?
Oh, please continue. I have, but you sound like you're more of an expert than I.
Mask diplomacy was a COVID era thing. It's COVID masks. And part of, when I was researching the matter of Indiana and why did Indiana, agree to take in this bad company that got kicked out of North Dakota. And it was our governor and our economic development agency that welcomed that company in. And then it was our legislature. So, we had our kind of like checks and balances, and the legislature wound up pushing them out. But in the meantime, our governor, part of one of the first articles I wrote for the Federalist was about the trend of what went on between our governor and a company. There was a company that was related. There was a nonprofit here in Indiana whose job it was to feed our governor more Chinese companies to bring in. It was to present a whole platter, a whole buffet of more Chinese companies. And that company, called the America-China Society of Indiana, is a little charitable foundation as well. That company was completely suspicious, and so that company did the following things. In 2019, our governor went to China to renew the sister relationship, which is a Chinese psychological operation of the CCP. While he was there, there was a photo taken of him standing with a lady who is the head of the CPAFFC, I believe it is, the acronym. That's the CCP's head of, that's the CCP's head of influencing foreign countries. And their mission, translated from Mandarin, is to make the foreign serve us. And he's captured in a picture with this lady, which I would think maybe could amount to blackmail or at least some kind of a psychological bribery. I thought we were friends kind of thing. At a minimum, it's I thought we were friends. At the maximum, maybe it's some kind of blackmail for anybody who actually knows what that lady represents. That was in 2019. And then in 2020, when COVID set in, mask diplomacy was that at first, when the masks were scarce, this is because everywhere where China had a supply chain related to masks, they actually withdrew the masks to China. Then, when they felt secure that they were going to have enough masks, they worked through companies like the America-China Society of Indiana to offer a very small gift amount of masks back to the municipalities in the states that the CCP considers its friend. And so right on cue, the state of Indiana, our governor was awarded that there's a contract. It's all in there, right? I put the contract in the article. There's a $0 contract between the state of Indiana and the America-China Society of Indiana for 100,000 masks, which is like a tiny amount. Indiana wound up buying like 27 million masks or something that year. So it's a tiny little trinket amount of masks, but it was part of mask diplomacy. And I speculated that that's also a kind of not only a psychological operation, but also potentially a stick rather than a carrot. It's a bargaining tool where later they can say, "But we gave you masks in the middle of the epidemic. We gave you masks, though. We saved you, and so now you owe us something." That was in 2020 when they gave state of Indiana the masks, and then come 2024, Indiana initially comes to accept this bad company that had gotten thrown out of North Dakota. And I wonder if that's all related. Why else would we accept a company that had been rejected elsewhere? So there was a trend of these sort of strange things that our governor had participated in. And they're all of a psychological nature, but I think specifically some of them are carrots and some of them are more stick. See how that...
You know what that makes me think of is sort of a pseudo-value creation technique that is used in persuasion, which is making up something as valuable when it's not. And an obvious technique we see is used in pricing throughout our supermarkets and grocery and Amazon and elsewhere, where there will be a little sticker that shows original price $79.99 and current price only $29. Wow, it's on sale $50. Pseudovalue. In our mind, we imagine, wow, this is $50 cheaper now. It's way more valuable because they're asking a lot less for this thing that's worth $79. BS. BS. That is completely made up. It was never $79. But it's pseudo value creation. This idea where we're quietly pulling away these masks, withdrawing them, and now we're gifting them to you. We're allowing to buy them to you. Pseudo value creation. I was watching this podcast on completely different related topic, but it shows. This is what I like to do on Daily Persuasion: is we like to take something that's in the news and in current events that's on all of our minds, and then extract a lesson from it and apply it on the opposite side of our everyday lives, which is in our everyday lives. Taking global events and saying, how does this apply to my life, my career, my relationships today, right now? And in this particular dating and relationships video I caught, this individual was pointing out that sometimes a person, whether it's a woman or a man, will say, oh gosh, I don't usually do this, but for you, I'll, and then the favor of some sort. Oh wow, I'm special, exclusive. They just made that up. They do that with everybody. Pseudo value creation. And that's another subtle persuasion technique that when you study ancient Chinese military and warfare doctrine, you see that these ultra sneaky tactics are part and parcel for how they operate. And now what I want to ask you is, what did you notice about Chinese culture while you were over there yourself, studying, working, and so on and so forth, that most Americans just don't get? And when we do get it, it does click for us. It can help us understand and also predict with accuracy how the CCP might behave in enmity with the United States. So what are some takeaways from your time in China?
Well, I have a couple of little vignettes maybe. So one was the used water bottles. So right after we got there, we kind of like get off the bus and we're just streaming, up the road. And there are these little cute grandma-looking ladies sitting on a cooler. They look, it's like a lemonade stand. They say we're selling water, and it was very hot. It was the middle of the summer, and so a bunch of people ran up there and bought the water and started drinking it. And some of the rest of us got up there and looked, and the seals were broken. And these ladies had refilled water out of probably a garden hose. That seems to be their tool of choice for most things. And, that's terrible. That's something, that you just wouldn't see that here. That's not consistent with any kind of...
That would be prison time in the United States. Like that is felony. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where you see something where you just had never considered such a thing before. I hadn't, maybe if one is well-traveled, but, I was 21, so, and so that was the used water bottles was one. Another one was... There was a lady in our travel group, loosely, an American, and she made a big stink. She got upset toward the end of the trip about, this isn't fair. We've done enough work. I don't feel like doing more work. And the rest of us, they were supposed to send the rest of us on a train like 3 days later to go to do a little touring or something before we leave the country. And they told the people who organized this thing, Chinese people, they told her, oh, okay, you worked enough. All right, we bought you a train ticket to go with the early release people tomorrow. And she just left, and we never saw her again. And there was no early release. That was like a huge lie. And I didn't know her. When I say like a loose group, there were people who joined, people got on planes from America and went to China. I never heard from, I don't know. We never saw her again. We never heard from her again. That was a fascinating thing that happened, because that's, terrible. What is that? Is that kidnapping? I don't know. She's an adult. It's terrible. It was an adult napping. They spirited her away and never to be heard from again. So I don't know. Maybe she made it all right. I don't know. there was an armed guard who escorted me out of the grocery store with his hand on his weapon because I took a picture of a display of food. Just, no
So
harm.
what you're describing right now is what people report when they come back from North Korea.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is not this is just a few years ago in China, I take it.
No, it was a while ago. It was a good while ago, but still not long enough ago that it should make a difference. I remember
Yeah.
going there at the time, and everybody, there was a sense of, well, it's not like Tiananmen Square. It's not like 1989. This is the modern times. And there are people who still say that now, but I don't think that that was long enough ago to make that argument. And yeah, it was very strange. What do you call that when an armed guard, like they hauled me out of there. There was no way I was staying in there. I think there might have even been two of them. I think one person had his hand on my arm, and then there was another one on my other side who was just making sure that I got out. Because I took a picture, because I thought it was funny. There was a big display of rice that was just open. This was before COVID times. I thought it was charming. I thought it was funny. I don't know. I was a kid.
Mm.
I wasn't upset about sanitary or anything like that. I just thought it was funny. But you are not allowed to take pictures at that grocery store for any reason. So yeah, it was just a very strange place. And these types of memories, like these, are just sort of the random stuff that happened to me over a short period of time, relatively. But you don't forget them. And when you see the stuff that happens here, those things that I remember from there make me very sure of the things that are happening here. And even the things that I hear about, I'm very sure that those accounts are true just because of what I saw there. And I imagine anybody else who's been there probably has had a similar experience.
And so we feel grateful that Comrade Kamala and Tiananmen Tim did not win the presidency in the U.S. in 2024 because that's sort of the aspirational left-wing government.
Hmm.
China is perpetually held up as as amongst globalists as a shining example of building a futuristic society and an orderly society and blah 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 blah. And also like they fight climate change when of course they have consistently been a top polluter and building more
Hmm.
coal plants than everybody else, so on and so on and
Hmm.
so forth. And wow, if only our society were more top-down, centrally planned and socialist like China, we wouldn't have these problems like gun violence and school shootings in America, and we wouldn't have the sort of people who would vote for Donald Trump. You'll hear people say in liberal intelligentsia sorts of circles, and it leads us to that observation amongst businesses, amongst entrepreneurs who have had dealings with Chinese companies, that there's a sense of being deeply disrespectful to your face and shivving you in the back as soon as it's maximally profitable for them
Hmm.
to do so. And every, let's say, e-commerce entrepreneur in America who's ever done anything with any Chinese company will point out that, wow, they gave us the best prices of any manufacturer that we talked to domestically or globally, and then our manufacturer stole all of our patented designs and trade secrets and began selling them direct to consumers in America at 1/5 the price. And when we called them on it, they lied about it. They lied right to her face. We had all the evidence, and they denied it 100% like they were some kind of a friggin' sociopath.
And then they sued us and won.
Yes.
No, no, that's a true story. That's a true
Yes.
story. No, in the pharmaceutical, I read that book, China RX. In the pharmaceutical industry, they would make crummy ingredients. Americans would get poisoned. We would sue them for the damages because people died. Then they would countersue us for libels, suggesting that we were lying about people dying. But because they bought better American attorneys, they won. Insane.
Win
Like,
without fighting. Win without fighting. It's all about win without fighting. This is why
except
it's
in
so
court,
important
win
for the
without.
United States to wrest back control of the Panama Canal and Greenland.
Mm.
People wonder, what is Panama Canal? What are you talking about? Greenland, the 51st state. What are you talking about? I think relationship federally, nationally, between the Canadian government and the CCP is far worse than it even is here. And I've shared a map break on the regular that it sometimes pops off and goes viral. I will say Western Hemisphere geopolitics in a nutshell. And it's the map of North America. You know, it's USA, below is cartels, to the north is CCP. And that's, of course, you could put CCP in place of the cartels. What have you learned about the relationship between the Mexican drug cartels, the drug trade, the trafficking, and the CCP?
They're working with the Mexican cartels, I believe, are working with the Chinese triad drug criminal organizations, the transnational criminal organizations. I read somewhere that, you see, so the triad transnational criminal organization, and that's all a bunch of stories that I've read from the Maine Wire, which is excellent. But these TCOs, the triad marijuana gangs, they buy houses all over Maine, hundreds of houses. The map is covered in them. I made a map about this. I'm working on it. I have more work to do on my map website. But they buy hundreds of houses in Maine, they totally rip out all the insides of the houses and retrofit them and turn them into basically a subtropical grow house, a hydroponic grow house. And they grow all this pot, and it ruins the houses, and they have to rewire the houses and all this kind of stuff. And it's just terrible. It's a whole terrible mess. But I've read that the Chinese buy these houses there's a connection to the Mexican drug cartels because they're trying to get rid of their money. So I think it has something to do with the property transaction. It's a money laundering. It's a three-way money laundering between the properties, the Chinese drug criminals, and the Mexican drug cartels. And it's because they're trying to get rid of their money, and the Chinese launder the money back to them. They kind of pay them back.
So we have to think about what then is known to the locals in Maine, to the citizens of Maine. So there would be county treasurers. That's to whom property taxes are paid. So the know your customer, that situation, the name, address, etc. of whoever is paying property taxes is known to the treasurer. The treasurer is an elected official. Who else would be involved? Well, it's possible that the local school boards and school districts, that's who property taxes end up going to in the first place. So when there are property tax levies, either to renew or have new ones, people involved with those would have to be familiar with the tax situation. You would have to have local real estate agents, groups, associations, realtors, real estate companies, all of these individuals locally on the ground, and the Facebook groups, like you said. I don't think it's reasonable to say that the Chinese and the cartels are hiding this from all of those. So why is this not the top story in the state of Maine? Why is it not trending on X every day? Why is it not on the front page of the New York Times? The sort of illegal takeover, tag teaming between the cartels and the CCP, taking over an entire state with illegal drug grow operations. What's happening there? $5,000 checks? Uh-oh. Oh, isn't that interesting? And we know that the governor of Maine was caught on video trash talking President Donald Trump to his face over the trans issue, boys and girls sports, biological males and girls sports, saying she was going to resist, and I'll see you in court, she said. And he said, good, I would enjoy that very much. That should be a really easy one, President Trump said a few weeks ago. Sure. Okay. Looks like we're still recording. Vanessa's system stopped recording, but I'll go ahead and continue speaking while she's not with us, as far as I can tell. Yes, that was a viral incident, and then of course the governor's office, everyone relented, and then they actually said, no, actually we're going to sue to keep biological males in girls' sports. Remember what we said about the left and how they played together? What I like to say is that the right is effective at self-policing. For example, there are these characters called the Groypers on the reactionary right, and they are generally kicked out and rejected from all mainstream and even fringe circles and networks amongst Republicans, conservatives, and so on and so forth. But when you look at the most radical elements on the left, they have excuses made for them. They're enabled, they're empowered by rank and file voters and citizens. And what you're seeing nowadays is in the United States, grassroots left-wing organizations are actually elevating and advancing for public office eventually, locally, statewide, and federally, the most radical amongst their fold. The sorts of people who say, yeah, Luigi Mangione is a hero. Oh, put that person as a state representative. They'll say things like, yeah, I hate white people. We should have reparations. We should tax all white people and end their race. And then they'll say things like, wow, we need to put that person as our state attorney general. And that's the sort of rhetoric that we hear from the far left. And that's who ultimately ends up getting advanced. Whereas the extreme fringe elements of those on the right, the equivalent, generally are dismissed from polite society. And so in that context, it makes sense then that the one-party state of Maine, which is generally run entirely by Democrats, they are not going to police their allies, the Chinese Communist Party, or rather the triad organization. Are you back recording with us, Vanessa? All right. No problem there. I'll continue going, and there's a lot of good stuff here, even if there's some disruption in the recording for all of you who are watching and listening. And we have to be aware that the Triad are known to the Chinese Communist Party, and yet they are still running around free, are they not? Well, yes, they are. Oh, so once again, we might have a situation where it's a proxy for the Chinese Communist Party. All of this, of course, if we zoom out even further, it's within a 100-year plan that the Chinese Communist Party is running for an ascendant China that is globally dominant and is the superpower. Now, because the United States is number one, China ought not directly attack the United States via traditional kinetic means, naval, army, infantry, so on and so forth, a direct battle. That would be catastrophic for China. So being the weaker belligerent, by all intents and purposes, what then must they do? They must engage in the plausibly deniable, low-intensity conflict. For example, fentanyl overdoses. The number of dead, particularly young people, 18 to 45, it's an overdose from fentanyl is the leading cause of death in the United States amongst 18 to 45. Oh, well, that would be like that number of people dying in a war against China every year. But no equivalent number of Chinese are dying as a result of this. It's a totally one-sided warfare situation. And there's a number of lessons that can be gleaned on the topics of persuasion, influence, mastery, victory, that can be gleaned from this. Many of them are dark lessons. So this might be something that you want to, let those who are listening to this, you might want to marinate on this. You might want to think about this on a long-term basis and see what else comes to you. The exploiting of cognitive biases, that's dark. The blackmail, manipulation, threats, also very dark. But you have to understand, despite its immorality, at least its unethical aspect, it works. It works. This has been an intense episode. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now. Thank you for joining me and Vanessa on this very special episode of Daily Persuasion.